We're in an unfinished business. Dr. Whitney, you have your proposed financial plan for 2015-16, I think.
Yes, sir, I do. In fact, before Mrs. Forsman, our Executive Director of Finance, speaks, she can make her way to the podium as I share with you four things that I want to point out about this year's financial proposed plan. One of the things the state has done this year is provided us with basically level funding, and you'll see specifically just the additional small amount that we did receive. However, over the last several years, we have received, it was a decrease, so we had to cut programs, reduce staff in some cases, eliminate positions. The other thing I want to point out is that in this plan, we will be addressing, I am proposing that we address 3 of the 5 cost-associated recommendations from the salary study that we talked about earlier today during the work session. You'll recall that there are 9, but 3 of the 5 that are cost-associated will be in this plan. The third thing is the focus of this budget is, as you well know, to repair and perhaps adjust our teacher salary scale. For several years, we have talked about how far we have fallen as far as our teacher salary scale is concerned. This budget includes adjusting that salary scale so that we can be more competitive with surrounding divisions. You'll also note that I've included a step increase for all employees, which I think are everyone would agree is well deserved. Mrs. Forsman, I'll let you share more specific details.
Good evening. As Dr. Whitney indicated, tonight we're presenting his proposed financial plan for fiscal 2015-2016. As you can see here, the budgeted funds summary shows that our total budget will be $150.9 million next year, with the operating fund coming in at $131,866,263, and with the grants fund at $11,598,597, and then food services at $7,440,301.
This is on page 37. It begins. I apologize for not sharing that earlier.
If we look at revenue for all funds, you can see that the operating fund is the majority of our budget. It makes up 88% of our total budget. The grants fund makes up 8% of our total budget, and food services 4% of our total budget. If we look at major classifications, expenditures by major classifications, you can see that we spend 74.35% on instruction. The next one would be operations and maintenance at 8.29%, then transportation at 5.07%, food services at 4.93%, technology at 3.87%, attendance and administration at 2.24%, and health and psychology at 1.26%. So that's the breakdown by major classification. And if you remember when we talked about how the budget is set up, those major classifications are put together by the State Department of Education, and this is how we follow it. If we look at expenditures by object code, as we all know, personnel, compensation, and benefits make up the majority of our budget, 84.2% for personnel, compensation, and benefits. If we look at the state revenue this year and what happened there, we can see that the basic aid was reduced by $425,438. This is not due to ADM, or average daily membership. It is not due to changes in the composite index. This is an adjustment that the state made because the sales tax estimate came in higher. So if you look down a couple of lines, you can see the sales tax estimate increased by $625,925. However, I would like to point out that that money is not guaranteed money. If we do not receive the sales tax money, the state will not make it up with basic aid money. Also included in the state revenue is a reduction for retirement. As you know, the governor's proposed plan in December included a slight rate decrease in the VRS rate, the employer portion of that rate, 0.35%. That coupled with the additional 0.07 that the General Assembly is now looking at gives a difference of $107,806 in a decrease in revenue, because remember the state supports that portion for us. So the revenue for that decreased just slightly because of that rate decrease. So the total increase with all those for the state revenues, $35,923. As you can see, basically level funding, not very much money at all. If we look at a history of the state funds the past 5 years, you can see there hasn't been a lot of movement in the amount of money we've received. And in fact, I included between 13-14 and 14-15 a little note here. The entire increase between those two biennial budgets was the increase in the employer rate for VRS. That's all that was about. There was absolutely no other money in there. If we look at our local revenue and our history there, you can see here from this slide that the red is the amount funded by the city, the blue is the amount we requested. You can see each year where we've requested and what we were funded, and the blue is what we requested and the red is what we funded. So in 14-15, you can see it's $49,684,053. That is the regular appropriation. Next year, we're proposing $53,570,053, a difference of $3,886,000. Changes to the proposed budget from last year to next year include, for the personnel budget, implementation of Phase 1 of the pay and classification study for contracted teachers, and that cost is $3,886,000. A step raise for full-time support employees that cost $672,303. Implementation of the classified Phase 1 of the study for the employee positions that were greater than 20% of the market, $59,430, for a total increased personnel cost of $4.6 million. All of these raises are inclusive of the 1% VRS phase-in. Changes to fringe benefits. We, due to the rate decrease that the governor proposed, and due to the phase-in, the next level of the phase-in, that 1% that we no longer pay on behalf of the employee that goes into salary, VRS decreased by $574,200. The health insurance, which is based on cost savings, cost containment, if you will, for cost-saving measures, we were able to reduce that budget by $473,884. Group life increased by $21,623, and of course, when you raise salaries, the group life goes up because of that. And then decreases in workers' comp, also again, cost-saving measures allowed us to decrease that budget by 20%, or $190,000. So we had benefit decreases of $1.2 million in our budget.
Forsman,
Yes, sir.
can you tell us how the decrease in health insurance occurred?
Well, we began a plan about a year ago of replacing some full-time staff with part-time staff that have no benefits. And so those staff that were replaced, as people left, we hired part-time folks, and they don't have the health insurance benefit. And so we see that savings from the health insurance that we would not offer those folks.
It's the main source of savings.
That is the
Thank you.
answer at this time.
Horseman,
Yes,
do we
ma'am.
still have about 75% of our employees using our insurance plan? Is that a number?
Or
Is
at
that correct?
A little over 89%.
A little
of
over
our-
89%, okay.
that are offered our plan, not, maybe they don't use it, but they're offered the
They
plan.
offered the plan. Okay.
Okay.
But do you know what percentage of the people, of the employees actually do use the plan, the Suffolk's plan? Some of them go on their husbands or
Right.
wives or whatever.
Correct.
You don't know.
There are about 500 employees that choose not to carry our insurance.
And how many employees do we have?
1,600.
1,600, okay. I guess I can work that percentage.
About 1,100 too.
Yeah.
And again, some of that can be dual because the way we run our insurance is if both employees work for us,
Yeah,
one
that's
carries
right.
the plan, the other's under that person's plan. So some of that 500, which is why that doesn't quite add up, some of that 500 is based on the dual where
Okay.
both people work for us, okay?
Okay.
Ready to move to the next one? For operating expenses, and this would be anything other than salaries and benefits, we had a an increase, in purchase services of $505,527. This includes for our special education occupational and physical therapy, skilled nurses for special education students, psychologists, and then we had a small increase for community and schools that the board agreed to. So that's $505,527. We had an increase in joint operations of $308,866. That would be CSEP, the Prudence Center for Technology, which follows us with the raises and things. They follow Suffolk Public Schools, so we pay a portion of that. And then decreases in postage and telephone and insurance of $148,176. And then some other cost savings, and these were just small adjustments to various programs based on historical spending or decreases by the program manager of where we could find some cost savings of $180,703. So the total operating expenses increased by $485,514. So with regard to this proposed budget, the pay and classification plan, Phase 1, the support personnel greater than 20% below market of $59,430. The title changes and the technology new grades, this $18,553 is absorbed by existing money in the technology department. So you won't see that as an increase on my other page because they were able to absorb that through other things in their own department and not have to put that money extra in the budget. And then implementation of the new teacher scale, which is $3,886,005. So the total for Phase 1 was $3,963,988. And those items are in this budget. Now, the reduced expenses that I just spoke of $1.2 million, those help to fund the step raise for the full-time support personnel, the minor increases in the operating cost, and the Phase 1 support position changes. Those equal the $1.2 million. So the city appropriation request in this budget is to increase the city appropriation by $3,886,000 to fund Phase 1 teacher portion of the pay and classification plan, which is the adjusted teacher scale. And then, hot off the press, as of the day before yesterday, we received information at the crossover that both the House and the Senate have put in the budget, in their budgets, proposals to increase SOQ instructional and support positions to provide that salary increase for just those portions of those positions for us of 1.5%. However, they differ on how to start them and how long they run. The House is 11 months with a match required by no later than January 1st, which means we would have to give the raise by January 1st. The Senate is no later than January 1st, but it's a 10-month basis, so they'll have to come together and figure out exactly how they can fund that and if they can keep that in there. And we won't know that much before the end of February. And then, of course, they changed the VS rate a slight amount more than the governor, but we've already taken into effect those changes. They're very minimal. Are there any questions?
4 questions. Ms. Forsman, do you mind explaining the SOQ, the Standards of Quality, Instructional and Support Positions? Because I think it's important to point out that if either of those pass, it's not a matter of providing funding for all employees. You want to talk a little more about that?
Certainly. As you know, the Senate, House and Senate, the SOQ positions are certain numbers of positions based on the numbers of students that we have. And so they give us an amount for teachers, paraprofessionals, assistant principals, support folks, and those numbers are what they're talking about supporting. They don't support our actual costs for those positions. We may choose to have more than that, but they only support those positions that they give us money for, and they only support on prevailing costs. So they take the cost of, for instance, an assistant principal across the state, and they take a portion of that, an average of that, and they use that as the prevailing cost. And then they take that and multiply it by the composite index, and we get that portion that's ours. So it's a portion of an average, not actual cost, and it's not every position that we physically have.
You're saying that the state probably funds, let's say, an elementary school. If you have an elementary school with 400 kids, the state will give you one person, one principal.
Principal.
But if you have an elementary school of 600 kids, they still will give you one person. Am I right? Or will they give
Principal
you
and a half.
For if you have 600 students at elementary school, they'll pay for half of
one and a half?
a half of an
half
assistant
a
principal.
person.
Half
Yes.
of- yes, sir.
So if you have two, so you had to pay, the local
Picks
will
up
have
the
to
other
take
half.
care of that other half.
Yes, sir.
So that's what you're saying?
And
Okay.
if their salary, if they're a seasoned employee and their salary is above prevailing costs, you're only going to get the state's portion of the prevailing cost, which is the average across the state.
That works the same with high school principals as well.
Sure.
What is the number of students you have to have at high school?
I don't have it off the top of my
Not
head, I'm
exactly
sorry.
sure, I don't recall.
I think it's 1,200 you have to have in order to have
A full-time, yes.
full-time assistant principal. Or is it one at 600 and?
I think it's 1 to 600, actually.
One at 600
Yeah,
and one at,
1 to
okay,
600,
I get that
right.
confused with middle and high, so, but yes, it's not at all, I mean, again, SOQ is basic, it's the basic education, and anything that we do above that is locally, yes, sir,
Up to tab?
locally paid for.
Okay.
Those are only standard of quality positions. That means like math, science, is that what you mean, or?
Yes. Well, it is certainly math and science, but there are other positions included in that as well.
And English, and,
Yes.
but not foreign language. Never foreign.
There are some elective classes, teachers in there also, yes.
Really?
Mhm.
Which ones?
I would have to pull the code to see exactly which ones, but,
Would it be ones that are related to standards of quality?
well,
I
it's
just
not-
don't understand how.
It's a number that they look at based on the number of
Number of
students for the most
They
part.
don't differentiate
Yeah.
between
Oh, what type
Foreign
of
language or
teacher
whatever,
or
yeah.
math.
anything?
They give you a total based on the number of students.
Okay, and that's going to be a amount of money.
Based on the numbers and based on the standards of quality formula that they use, yes.
Okay, so that's outside of our budget.
That the state
That's
would give us, they're proposing to give us, yes.
Okay, and you'll know that by February, you said, or so? I mean,
By the end of February, they have to make a decision before they leave.
Okay,
Now,
Okay.
They don't have to, because we know in past they
I
haven't
know,
always
I know.
had to, but, you know, we hope that they'll make a decision by the time they leave the end of February.
Okay, thank
And
you.
that's the hope.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Forsman.